Hey, what's good everybody? It's cjbeatz. We're back at it again today. Today I'm going to mix a beat in Logic Pro X. Last week I released a tutorial on how I created this beat, and if you haven't watched that tutorial, I definitely recommend that you do that first before going into this one, because during the process of creating the beat, I did a lot of what I call pre-mixing. Before I track everything out and get it ready for my final mix and master, I generally try to do all of my gain staging in the creation process. So that means, making sure that nothing's peaking. I'm keeping my stereo output at around -6 to leave headroom for the final mix and master, where I'll essentially push everything back up to maybe a -0.6 dB output on my stereo mix. So again, if you haven't watched that tutorial yet, I'll put a link in the cards right here so you can go check that out. Once you've completed watching that one, feel free to come back to this tutorial if it interests you and continue watching. Just like my last video, I tried to keep it with minimal edits, so therefore this tutorial might turn out kind of long too. But again, I feel like that you guys, actually enjoy watching entire processes like this that aren't edited. Anyway, let's get into this. First things first, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping and getting organized and getting ourselves ready for mixing this beat. And what I generally do once I've imported my track outs, and that's just simply like dragging and dropping them, making sure my tempo is at the right tempo that the beat was created in, I'll go ahead and, name all of my tracks to what they are, and then I rearrange them. You can rename them by simply double clicking on a track and renaming it, and then you can drag and drop to your liking basically. I generally keep all of my instrumentation like you see here: keys, chords, arp pad, hook, lead, vox, all at the top, and then I'll go into my drums, my percussion, my hi-hats, open hat, crash, and lastly the effects. Once you've sorted everything to your liking, the next thing you should do is highlight all your tracks, right click or control click, and then go to name and color and hit this name regions by tracks. So all of those individual wave files have now been renamed to what they are called in the track, so they match up. The second thing I do is group everything by, or color everything by groups. So like, for example, the keys and the chords, I can go ahead and color those by going to name the color and then say show hide color. And, I generally just try to make them different colors. Maybe the arp and the pad, I'll have this color. The hook, lead, and the vox, I'll have in this color. Then my kick and a clap, go in a different direction now. All my perks could be the same color. Then I'll go into my bass, make that a different color. Hi-hats and a open hat. Crash and effects. And once everything is, colored and named, we're pretty much ready to go. Okay, so the first thing I would do if, I didn't create this beat, the first thing I would do is look at all my tracks. If you hit X on your keyboard, you can bring up your mixer, and I'm going to take a look at how all these levels are coming in. I'll play the beat from, I know where the loudest part is, so go straight to that, this area right here. You could also, obviously zoom in and see where stuff is happening basically. But yeah, this is the loudest part of the beat. I'm going to take a look at all the tracks and see if anything's peaking out. Now again, I created this beat and I did a lot of gain staging prior to exporting everything, tracking everything out, and then bringing it into this project. So therefore, I know nothing's going to peak, but if you're working with other beat makers and you're mixing their beats, a lot of the times I've come across a lot of hot tracks, and these tracks are going into the red, and I like generally having everything at a lower volume level before I actually get into my mixing process. This way I can keep an eye on my stereo output and make sure that I'm not peaking, and that essentially will allow me to get a cleaner mix. Okay, so let's play this part back. I'm referencing all the tracks here, taking a look at if there's anything peeking out, going into their orange or the red. And if something does turn out to be orange or red, I would probably start with adding a gain tool like this. So I'm just going to show you what it would look like. You know, that's way too loud, so we can reduce the gain and bring it to an acceptable level. Again, all my tracks are not peaking, so I'm not really going to worry about that part. But that's, you know, the first thing you should do is make sure that all your levels are right, and try to aim for a -6 dB stereo output. You know, when you're gain staging, so that I have at least 6 dB of headroom to work with. Another thing you should look for, you know, before continuing, is making sure that your pre-fader metering tool is turned on in Logic. And what this allows you to do is basically, you know, look at the channel in a way that is more input oriented versus output oriented. And this, you know, definitely helps with when you're adding plugins on certain channel strips. These you know, those plugins could be messing with your gain. And if I have this tool turned off, I'll show you what I mean here. And I'll just drop like a compressor onto this channel strip and, you know, bring the threshold really far up, you know, and increase the makeup. As you could tell right away, you know, this is peaking way too loud, right? And if the pre-fader metering tool is turned off like it is right now, if I compensate for that by, you know, lowering this fader tool, it's essentially not getting rid of that peak. All it's doing is basically masking that peak and then bringing that peak down. But if I have the pre-fader metering tool enabled, I can basically tell, you know, before it gets into the plugin, how much of that sound I want to get into the plugin. So I'm not fooled, you know, by that output if I have it the other way around. So making sure, again, that your pre-fader metering tool is turned on is essential. You can find the pre-fader tool by making sure to go under Custom. You can customize your control bar like so. The pre-fader metering is right here under Modes and Functions. Just make sure that's turned on, because by default in Logic, and I don't know why, the pre-fader metering is not turned on. So, okay, so we are now ready to start getting into our EQing process. To get started, what I usually do is just select all of my channel strips like so, and then enabling the channel EQ for all of those. I'm going to start off with my keys. I'm going to start soloing this out, bringing up that EQ, and start cutting out non-essential stuff. I'm not, you know, trying to get rid of sound, but I just want to get out everything that's not essential without basically hurting the original sound that I was going for. I'm creating space right now. I'm going to go and enable the second EQ. This one has a little bit of low end that I want to get rid of though, because that low end is going to be occupied by the bass and stuff. So again, I want to make room. I've shown this in other tutorials, but it's, you know, it's a good way of making sure that before you know, start adding different plugins and stuff like that, you have a clean slate to go off of. You can start adding back some of those mid-lows. But, you know, usually my basses go from like 20 to maybe 200, 250 to 300 hertz. So you know, I want to make sure that I cut out as much as possible, so there's no, you know, there's the least amount of, you know, interference between those two different instruments. That's pretty good. Let's go on to the ARP. To zoom into my mix to figure out where the ARP happens. Over here. Again, I'm just, you know, touching it up right now. That's all I'm doing, really. And let's see where we have this pad happening over here. Start, you know, removing some of the solos so you can hear it better. Got this hook lead. Vox. Okay, next is our kick. I don't want to kill too many of those frequencies. Just gonna see what happens if I cut out that 1K range there. And it's sort of getting rid of that knocky part that I like of the kick, so I'm gonna bring it back a little bit. Could be have a little bit toned down, but not much. Too flat. More thump. That's pretty good right there. Claps next. Percussion. Percussion piece number 3, no, number 2. And number 3 now. Number 3 is happening over here. Number 4. perk number 5. I want to cut out a little bit of that high mids over there. Leave room for that hi-hats. Hi-hats are probably going to be in the 2K to, you know, whatever, 10K, 20K range. Okay, baseline. Not going to put a low cut frequency on this. I'm just trying to see where I can start cutting off those low mids. Okay, let's go to the hi-hat. Okay, hi-hats are around 3,400 all the way to like 9,400. And you know, with the hi-hats, sometimes what I like to do to brighten them up a little bit is just, you know, use this guy right here. Not too much, because I'm going to add like different effect plugins on them to make them stand out a little more. But you can get started by, you know, boosting that, and then just a nice little tail cut at the end there. Hi-hat number 2. This one's sort of at the lower, it's between 2,000 to like 4,000. Got an open hat. Okay, let's go to the crash, which is right there. That should work if I solo that out. Actually crashes over here, my bad. So that one's kind of high. All right, that sounds good to me. Just cut out a little bit of that high end to reduce the hiss on that crash. Last but not least, we got like a transition effect. It's very quiet though, so I gotta find it. There it is. All right, so. Yeah, it's hardly noticeable, but it's still there. All right, cool. So now that all the EQing is done, we could start thinking about mixing our instrumentation. So I'm going to unsolo everything, and let's go right to the beginning here and have a listen. Got like sort of an intro effect going on at the very beginning here. We'll start with the keys. Actually, chords start first, so. Solo those out, and I'm going to bring some effects in now to start making this sound a little cleaner, a little more crispy, I guess you could say. Could start working with perhaps some Slate Digital. I like Slate Digital stuff, especially the virtual mix rack. super fire. Could start off with you know, a classic strip here for keys. So we're going to look for something for keys here. I'm going to start messing with some of these parameters here. We have the revival. You can add, you know, thickness and shimmer. I like to go extreme and then like tone it back. And it's got a trimmer too, which is like nice for gain reduction. So whatever you're adding here, you could tone back down at the very end. There's not much shimmer in this sound because it's very MIDI, you know, MIDI in the sense that it's most of the frequencies are in the middle versus on the high end or the low end. So adding shimmer really isn't doing anything, you could tell, because the shimmer would have been this area over here, but we're cutting that out, so that's fine. But we did add some thickness there. We can maybe tone those high mid frequencies up a bit though. So what I like to do is go to this EQ, see what's like maybe lacking. It's probably 1 to maybe 1500. Maybe that area could be a little more accentuated. So we're gonna find that. So like 1500 kilohertz right there. Gonna, you know, just add a little bit of that range back. Can go back to the channel strip EQ here and see maybe what we could tone down. Feel like that right there. Show you a little trick here. I've shown this in other tutorials as well, but you could sweep a frequency like that. And when you hear that tone, you know it needs to be toned down. So I'm going to start toning it down by using the channel strip EQ. Then I'm going to go back to my virtual mix rack and use that EQ as well to tone it down maybe a little more. So again, that was the 370 hertz range. So that would be our low mid frequencies. So I'm going to tone it down to, say, what was that again? 370. It's pretty accurate. Now maybe we can add some shimmer here, if that's working. Not really, that's all right. There's other stuff happening also here. It's got another equalizer and another compressor, but I like the way it sounds right now. These definitely add character to the sound, but I don't necessarily need to tweak them in a sense because all the tweaking I did was with the EQ, the revival, and the trimmer. Okay, we could also widen up that sound a little bit. There's a tool that I like to use, and that's the iZotope Ozone Imager. It's actually a free plugin that you could pick up from iZotope. And what this does is make the sound more stereo. Widens it up a lot. If I turn it off, I'll let you hear it without. Maybe that's a little too much. Tone it down a little bit. Can start adding the other sound back now, these keys. And they do sound kind of flat, so maybe I will want to add that same mix rack. Start with the EQ, tone it down a little bit already. And there's definitely frequency in there that's hurting my ears. It's right there. And, you know, you'll get better at this, finding these frequencies that mess with you once you keep training your ear. But, and I could see it too in the spectrum. It's that guy right there. Oof, that's rough. That's the 250 range. No, that's the also 370. Same range again. Okay, so let's go and do that same thing again. Find 370. Tune that up down a little bit here. Like removing it completely makes the piano sound a lot better, but I don't want to go crazy like that. Let's add a little bit here. Maybe we could also accentuate a little bit of the high end on that piano. Make it sound a little crisper. If you're adding some high mid frequencies, you know, in this area here, you definitely like make the piano sound a little better in terms of like crisper in a sense. So let's see here. It's definitely lacking that range right there. It's still there. You'll see him peak up just a little bit, but I want more of that sound. So say 2500. Let's bring that knob to 2500 and start boosting those frequencies. Now, since I widened that first one, if they're both together, let's see what that sounds like combined. Yeah, that, you know, they match each other well. They're not like clashing in the stereo field either. So let's keep them like that. Next one up is the ARP. So let's take a look at this ARP here. Might be some frequencies when we want to cut out here. I think just that one guy, that guy right there, 860 maybe. It only appears a few times, but it's definitely there. So let's tone that guy down a little lot. A little lot. A lot. I don't want to do too much destructive EQing like that. You know, I just want to take out the worst sounding frequencies basically. Maybe that could also use a little bit of widening. This time around, we could use something else. Let's go with like an S1 imager from Waves. I have a little bit of, you know, asymmetrical sound here. Change the rotation a little bit. It's essentially panning, but panning with an imager. Sounds pretty good in my opinion. On to the next one. We got a pad here. And notice that I'm keeping all these other soloed elements on so that I can hear everything in combination, right? If I want to, you know, go like real deep into a mix, I'll solo out each individual sound. But, you know, this way I can hear what it sounds like in relation to the other sounds I already mixed. That one's a tough one to mix. A lot of these frequencies have already been sort of occupied by others. So we can get away with that by using something called binaural panning. And I've shown this, you know, in other tutorials as well. But the binaural pan is really great to, you know, create space in your mixes and, you know, really have something further away from you, closer to you, further right, further left, etc. It's like a pan, but it's like having the ability to, you know, focus where this sound is going to be. So I'm hearing this in my head to, you know, have it sort of coming from the right side. And I'm thinking too here, probably going to turn these guys off for a second so you guys can really hear the difference. If I, you know, go to a regular balance pan like this and just turn it right, it doesn't sound the same as the binaural pan. The binaural pan still gives it some depth, I feel like. And you could also, you know, make it more not as wide. So it has like, it's an imaging and panning tool in one, sort of, if that makes sense. So I like it a little wider though. All right, let's hear it again with the other sounds combined. Okay, let's move on to this hook lead, which is right here. And what I'm thinking of doing here is also using a binaural pan, but then having it further to the left. Don't have to really do much to that sound because it's kind of quiet. I don't think I'll have to do any destructive EQing to this either. Like the frequencies in there aren't really hurting my ears. All right, let's go over to this Vox part right here. So because that one's kind of hard to hear now, I could solo it out. Maybe we can, you know, make these vocals stand out a little more because they're kind of quiet in the mix. So let's go with a Vitamin. Some EQ. They have some nice presets in here, especially for vocals. Let's go with the vocal presence. This is after and this is before. Okay, let's hear everything with what we've already mixed so far. Let's hear it without the Vitamin. Sort of tucked into it, the mix. More present. Still looking at my stereo output the entire time. I'm at negative 15 dB right now. So that's good. I'm leaving myself a lot of room, but that's going to change once I start adding these drums. Before I go into mixing my drums, maybe I want to add some auxiliary channels and, you know, add a little more sauce to certain sounds. So like, you know, the chords and the keys perhaps. So I'm going to use the sends function and create a new bus, which is going to create a new aux channel. And then I'm going to start adding some reverb to this. There's one reverb I like a lot. I use this pretty much on everything. It's Endless Smile by Data Life. And it's actually not supposed to, it's supposed to be like a transition effect, but I feel like the way it sounds as a reverb is just fantastic. So what I'm doing with the sends is basically, it gives me the ability to send only a little bit or a lot of bit of that sound over to this aux channel. So this is going to carry basically just a little bit of reverb so that, you know, when I'm not basically overdoing it with all the plugins on one channel. I have the sound being sent out to auxiliary channels so that that little bit of sound that I'm sending to it, which could be, let's say, start at negative 18 dB. So negative 18 dB of this sound while it's going through the channel EQ, the virtual mix rack, and the ozone imager will be sent over to this auxiliary channel that has the Endless Smile plugin on it. So it's good to hear again if I solo just those chords out and then just the reverb portion. So that's nice, and maybe we could do the same thing to the keys, but instead we'll do this on aux 2 or bus 2 to aux 2, and then for here we'll add a different plugin. Maybe we could add something like halftime. This is experimental, guys, so this might not work out, but hey, this is all, you know, fun. It's supposed to be fun anyway. So if I have halftime on that and I'm sending a little bit of that sound over, what's this going to sound like? So make sure I have that solo enabled first. Half loop maybe. And then what we could do is drop an EQ on this, cut the lows and the mids out, boost that crazy 2700 range up. Let's go back to halftime and include the entire range like that. Okay, so we added a little bit of, you know, juice to those sounds using those auxiliary channels, and this is what it sounds like, what we've mixed so far. You can also pan these left and right using, let's try using the stereo pan now. Far left and far right. Just wanted to let you hear those two parts. Okay, so now we can start getting into mixing our drums further. We've already EQ'd all the sounds beforehand, so now let's solo out the drum. And I chose a drum like, you know, when you watch the other video, you'll notice that I took my time in finding the right kick. Because I generally find kicks that are short, that are punchy, and that will cut through, you know, bass sounds, basically. I'm not a huge fan of side chaining. That's why I'm sort of the guy that says it's better to find a kick that works well with the bass versus a kick that, you know, gets the bass flooded. Like it has a lot of low end and it's like clashing with that other sound. But if you have a long bass and a short kick, punchy kick that can kick right through the bass, sidechaining isn't really essential. If you do want to learn more about sidechaining, I did a tutorial on sidechaining and mixing 808s and kicks specifically. I'll put a link in the cards right here so you can check it out at a later time. And, you know, for those of you that do want to use side chaining because the, you know, your 808s and your bass and your kicks aren't really matching up that well, that is a way to do that. But, you know, I'm more of a sound selection guy than, you know, it saves myself time and effort finding the right sounds versus trying to make them work later on in the mix. So just my 2 cents. So anyway, now that we are working on the kick, what I'm going to try and do here is I'll add another, let's see what we can add here. I'm going to go with another Slate Digital virtual mix rack and start with a preset here. Let's do, I don't know, big rock kick. Let's figure out what's going on here. Not too much. Metal kick. Ooh, a lot of mids there. Power kick. Start toning stuff down. I don't like that high end on there. And again, this is now where looking at your stereo output is essential because, you know, the drums are really going to add that volume to your beat. So, you know, we're not in the mastering process yet, so we got to make sure we're leaving headroom. I like the way that this sounds, right? The way that this kick sounds right now. And I know the bass is, let's see, where did I put the bass? Right here. It's a good idea to, you know, keep your bass and your kick on to reference it to. And the bass doesn't have any effects on them right now. It sounds kind of flat. So, you know, I like the way the kick sounds right now. I'm still at -6.5 on my channel, on my stereo output. So now let me add another virtual mix rack to the bass. They got a crazy EDM. Well, it's an EDM preset, but I like using it. It's called the 808 Insanity. Adds a lot of low end, but we got to compensate for that. Tone it down a little bit here. One part, it jumps up to 4. I'm noticing it's getting better if I'm using this EQ here on the bass to tone it down a little bit. It's still nice and full though, you know? 4.9 again. Could be just because it's looping, so I'm going to let it play. So that one's a little problematic because it's jumping like from -7 to -5.2. So I'm trying to see what's happening here. This is real life problem solving. That guy right there. So what we might have to do here is use a little bit of automation to tone down that volume. So I'm figuring it's this guy right here. Let's see what happens if I loop off a short section. Yep, still going to 5.2. And, you know, I only have, I still have a lot of other sounds to add. So I'm taking that into consideration here, and I want to use my automation to maybe tone down the volume just in that part. So I'm going to hit A on my keyboard here. Volume's already selected. And if I click there, yellow line appears. I'm going to add 4 dots, just like this. Zoom in so you can see better. And I'm going to tone this down. So if it's -5, and I want to get it to, or -5.2, and I want to get it to -6, I have to compensate by 0.8. Let's do 0.9. Subtlety is really important when you're mixing. And we're at a 6. Perfect. That's what I want. You know, when you're finding problems like that, little corrections like this will go a long, long way. Nice. Okay. Looking good, looking good. Now, continue with our drum mixing here. We got the clap. Flat, so flat, needs to be much more prevalent in the mix here. So let's find a nice preset that we could start with here. Let's look at, I mean, it's not, you know, they have this, let's see if they have a clap. Do they have a clap? I think I saw one the other day. Nothing. All right. So maybe we can look under some of these other ones here. Hi. Drums. Big snare, classic snare. Overheads, power kick, punchy snare. Let's try the punchy snare on top of the clap. So we might have a problem area again. Yep, just that one right there. That jumps to 4.7, so we need to compensate for that as well. And you know what's going to happen is these automations that I'm creating, we'll need to apply them in the problem areas going forward too. But I like to find the problem areas because this beat is pretty simple in terms of repetition. You know, like you have, it goes from an intro into, I guess, something you call pre-hook to a verse to a hook to a verse to a hook to a verse to a hook. So, you know, it'll be easy to locate these later on and then reapply them just by simply highlighting them, holding down Alt, and then you can click and drag them anywhere. So you don't have to draw all those bubbles and shit like that. You know what I mean? It's just, you know what? We're gonna, for what's happening right now, maybe it's a good idea to listen to the whole thing. Keeping a look at our stereo output, making sure everything is proper. Already a -4.9. So should have probably did this earlier. So that clap right there, right off the bat, maybe we'll tone down the virtual mix rack a little bit. So I'm going to tone down that high end off of it a little bit. High mids, I guess you could say. -5.7 is still good. If it's like jumping, you know, like when I say -6, I'm obviously, you know, it can't be perfect all the time, but I just use that as a rule of thumb. But -5.7 is still pretty good. You know, it's like a fine line between what do I want to sacrifice versus, you know, what do I have my stereo output. This mix is very low right now. You got to remember that I'm going to master it afterward. That's basically the point where I'm bringing the mix up back to close to you know, the threshold of 0. But I'm trying to keep my mix low right now so that, you know, if I'm sending this beat out to an artist, I'm not going to send them the mastered version of the beat. I want to give them the headroom. So that's essentially what I'm trying to do here, is with leaving the headroom is, you know, number one, being able to master it myself so that I can put it on streaming platforms like YouTube, SoundCloud, BeatStars, etc. So, you know, when people are listening to it on their phones, their laptops, their car, you know, wherever it's being played, it still sounds nice and loud. But then when they're going to put their vocals on it, they need headroom. So it's essential that you know the difference. It's essential that you know that artists that are, you know, recording in studios and stuff like that, they will want headroom in order to in order to record their vocals, and then it gets mastered afterwards. I've talked about this a lot, but some of you might just be joining in for the first time, and you need to know this stuff. So anyway, let's continue on. -5.7. I'm just gonna let it play a little more. You know, referencing what you did so far is really important. Making sure it sounds good to you. All right, now let's start adding this percussion back here. I did a lot of, you know, in the creation of this beat, I did a lot of panning already. So you could hear that. And see it too, like they tend to be more right and left. Maybe this one could be more left, so maybe use a binaural pan. I say left, but I mean right. Because I like perk 3 and perk 5. I like what they do in that section where they go, that might be too much. Binaural pan on all of these here. this one perk here that sounds like almost like a submarine. I don't know. You know, maybe we could have that sound like it's coming from the back. You're going to have to wear headphones to hear the difference because it's crazy. Binaural pan, like, it's like surround, you know? Surround sound. Let's see what that sounds like with everything we had so far. It sounds a little too far away, I feel like. But I like the positioning, so maybe I'll add a little bit of some flanging effects. Feel like it's not in the right position though. Yeah, it sounds better over here. All right, cool. So now that's done. We need to work on our hi-hats. So I'll turn both hi-hats on. Hi-hats already have panning on them. They have a panning effect that I put on earlier in the creation of the beat. They're just sort of jumping all around the place, which I kind of like in my hi-hats. But maybe we could add a little more sauce. Let's go back to Slate Digital here, do our mix rack. They have these warm hi-hat presets that I like too. We're at -5.5 now. Still okay. And adding that shimmer really brightened up the hi-hats. Turn that off. Sort of like in the background. A lot more in the, in the front. Now, I already de-essed my hi-hats, but just to show you guys, what I usually do if my hi-hats seem a little too, there's a lot more, sibilance in them than I would like, I'll use a de-esser. And most de-essers already come with some overhead presets. So I like to do the overhead soften. But I don't want to, go crazy with this right now because I already did that in the creation process. But adding that shimmer definitely added a lot more sibilance back. So maybe we could tone it down a little bit. Now for these other hi-hats that are sort of on the low end, what I want to do is maybe use a panning effect on those as well. And I'm going to go over to my Sound Toys Pan Man. And generally I just go with the default and change it up to a ping pong, set my trigger right, set my width. I like the width to be wide for this maybe, so I have it almost full. Now they're over here. Gotta change my trigger. So depending on where I set my trigger, because the volume's kind of low on these, I have to set the trigger really low. But the trigger basically determines anytime that sound comes in, that it's going to go left and right, or left or right. Use a little bit of smoothing on this here. A little less wide. Yeah, I like that. All right, cool. Now, open hat. Maybe we could use a stereo pan on this one. It's leaning off to the right a little bit. I like it more left, maybe. Let's tone it down a bit. Take a look at our stereo output, -5.4. So I'm going to allow myself to go to like -5 at the most. 5.3. I lied. Got a crash too. It comes in at the beginning here. I feel like the crash sounds, I don't know, cheap, flat. That was a wrong choice of like sound selection on my part, so I need to fix that. Maybe we can add like a little bit of distortion on this. Let's use some stock plugins. Let's go with like maybe an overdrive. Find something else here. I'm trying to find something grungier. Go with distortion too. Maybe we can compensate for that high end. You know what also would be nice is maybe adding a delay to this. Let's go with another stock plugin here. Let's go with delay, like using the tape delay. Probably is going to have to be a half step. Presets. maybe we could do the same thing and add a pan man to that. Same idea, ping pong, trigger down, width. Maybe we can offset this to the right a little bit. A little smoothing to that. Trigger needs to be lower. And I wanted to do one more rotation in terms of the delay, or the panning rather. So what I could do is maybe add more feedback. I'm not sure what's happening there. Sort of nice how it fades off to the right there. And we got an effect, and that's our last sound in the beat. And then we could start thinking about our mastering. Okay, so it's right there. Sort of off in the distance. So maybe we can brighten that up here. I'm just going to pick something random from the Slate Digital mix rack. And vibe strip. Vox. Cool. So all of our sounds are basically mixed at this point. Let's go ahead and think about our mastering process. And there's a couple of ways I go about mastering. I'm going to show you guys sort of like the easy way out, if you wish. And then I'm going to show you like an actual chain that I would put together for my final mix, for my final master. So let's start off with a plugin that I've shown in other tutorials as well, called the Isotope Ozone 8 Elements. And what's great about this is if you don't know anything about mastering, you have something called a mastering assistant or a master assistant. So if I have that enabled, and I'm going to go back to like the loudest part of the beat right here, it's going to say, what are you going for? Streaming or CD? We'll say streaming. And it's waiting for the audio to play, so I'll hit the play button. It's analyzing the audio right now. Okay, it's going to sound crazy at first. But now we have a very loud master, maybe even too loud. Over here, you can see your peak and your RMS levels. Those are very important to take a note of. Your peak is what you see in this, this meter right here, and the RMS is the perceived loudness level, what human ears would hear. And generally speaking, I try to, get my mixes at around -9, -10 RMS, with a peak at -1 or -0.6, something like that. And Ozone Elements, or Ozone 8 Elements, basically only has 3 parameters that you can mess with: an equalizer, an imager, and a maximizer. And a lot of people overthink the process of mastering, and essentially that's only if I were to make a plugin chain, which I'm going to show you guys in a second. I would do the same thing. I would actually not even put an imager in the mix, but and this imager is actually turned off right now, as you can see here, because if you have elements that you want to keep mono in your mix, the imager is going to mess with that, because it's all, everything's being outputted into the stereo channel. So if I add an imager to this, and maybe the best way to explain this is actually showing you guys, and like mess with the width or whatever, or stereoize the entire thing. This weird effect where, really messes with your mix. Like, your all your mono stuff, your kick, your clap, and I've explained this in the other video. Again, another reference to the other video, but this whole process of creating the beat and mixing the beat goes hand in hand. So your kicks, your 808s, your basses, I always keep those mono. So this way basically they have a way better effect when those sounds are in mono, in my opinion. So again, imager, no bueno for the master, for the stereo output. So we have a maximizer and an equalizer, and this master assistant basically just curated this beat to its liking. You can obviously go in here and make additional changes. So it took a lot of the low end off. Maybe we can bring some of that back. It enhanced some of the mid-range here, a little bit of that high mids as well, and lastly, a little bit of that really high-end range here, 15.3 kilohertz. So, okay, that's one way of mastering your beat so that it's broadcast ready, nice and loud. This is the before. This is the after. Another way would be to make your own plugin chain, and I'm going to do that right now using some Waves plugins. And I'm going to do my best to list all of the different plugins I used for this mixing tutorial in the description of this video, so you can go check out these different companies and stuff. In general, I've always done tutorials with stock plugins, but you have to know that you can only get so far with using stock plugins. If you're really going for a specific type of sound, a more professional sound, then I would definitely invest in some plugins. It's as simple as that. All right, so with the Waves plugins, what I would probably start with is maybe you could use something like Vitamin. I keep going back to Vitamin because I like how it sounds. And this would essentially be the same thing as the EQ in the Ozone 8, and this is a good way of looking at it, to see what's happening here. So it goes into an equalizer first, and from here you could load a preset for mastering. So let's try mastering 1. And you can tweak these obviously, but I'm going to go through all the different mastering presets they have here and see what sounds good. This one's like, adding more low, more highs, but cutting out the mids. Sort of a brighter mastering mix. Low end mastering mix. We don't have many to work with here. Probably number 1. Once you have it the way you like, the next thing would be to bring in something called a maximizer. So I'm going to use the Ultra Maximizer by Waves, and this is essentially the same thing as the maximizer on Isotope Ozone 8 Elements. And got to find it really quick here. It is the L1 Ultra Maximizer in stereo. And when you're looking at the Isotope Ozone 8, you saw me use the threshold earlier, and that's what we're also going to mess with here, is the threshold and the outsealing, and then also a little bit with the attack and release here, or the release, I should say. You can also use the auto release. I try to stay away from that because I, trust my ears more than I do a machine. And yeah, it's definitely a great maximizing tool for your mastering chain. So let's go ahead and start listening in here. Oh, I forgot to do this. And for this chain, if I'm using my own plugins, what I want to do is also reference my RMS and peak like I did in Ozone 8 Elements. So what I'm going to do is use a plugin by Apple called the Level Meter. I'm going to make sure that peak and RMS are enabled. So right now we're at -5, -4.9, -5. So, and our RMS is at around -17. So again, I want to bring, maybe we'll put the outsealing at -0.6 and bring down our threshold. So I'm getting it to -11.7 RMS versus the -9 I was getting to with a cleaner sound on the Ozone 8 Elements using my own chain. So, it's up to you what you want to use, but I feel like it sounds a little bit fatter. What I can do now is like maybe show you this one. This is the mastering with Ozone 8 Elements. Versus my own mastering chain. Definitely sounds a lot fuller that way. Okay, I think we are finally finished with the mix and master on this beat. I really appreciate you guys sticking around for this whole process and watching the entire video. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe, hit the bell so that you get notified when I upload new content. Hit that like button for me if you learned something new today, and stay tuned for more videos. For those of you that are new to the channel, I also do live streams where I critique beats and songs on the spot. Myself and my subscribers have also done some beat battles, which were super exciting and super lit. So, please make sure to hit that bell button so you can see the next time on the line. Let me hear your beats and songs, and, I'll give you my 2 cents or whatever. Again, thanks so much for watching this video. My name is CJ, and I'm out for now. Peace.